Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Ked. This video I know is going to piss some people off, especially if you don't watch it all. But this video is on why you should be racist, okay? This is going to really ruffle some feathers, so let me start with the warning, which I originally didn't. This video was made for satirical and entertainment purposes only. I am in no way, shape, or form using this video to spread ideas of hate nor justify the vile and shallow beliefs many people hold, especially on the basis of race. This is not a video justifying you to dislike somebody else. This isn't a hate video. This is actually the opposite, okay? So, this video is supposed to target people who think that people who say that they don't see color. I don't like this phrase because I think it invalidates the experiences many people live because of their race. Unfortunately, it is something that is a part of your identity. Race is a part of your identity. An alternative to this phrase, by the way, is anybody who says, oh, there's only one, I'm not racist, there's only one race, the human race. I hate that shit. I had a music teacher in middle school who would say shit that I thought was extremely, it was like, you guys ever seen Everybody Hates Chris? And there's that teacher that's just always saying shit that is like really racist to Chris. I forget her name, but yeah, she was basically like that, but in real life. And I guess not as bad because I didn't really go to school with that many black kids in middle school. Unfortunately, that's what zoning does. And so, but she was like that to other races. And yeah, you call her out and she'd be like, oh, well, I only see one race, the human race. And by the way, she got called out not just by me, but by others too. And she was weird, okay? I don't know where she is now, and I hope she's doing fine and has learned her ways. She's a hippie. But yeah, saying this, I don't see color, I think really isn't enough. Because it's one thing to play the game of I don't see color. I think in an ideal world, of course you shouldn't see color, right? Nobody should really have judgments about somebody because of their race. However, I think that there's two types of racism. I think there's hate racism, which is, what you think of whenever you think of somebody who is a racist. Somebody who hyperfixates on things that, on racial identity. I think that is hateful racism. People who think that they are better than others based solely on race. But I also think there is good racism in the sense that you are sensitive to the fact that some people have racial differences and you are aware of that and you approach things with care and with caution, right? I think that there is such a thing as good racism, believe it or not, by definition of racism, which is to treat somebody different based solely on their race. Yes, that is not like the literal definition, but I remember the literal definition saying some shit about like targeting minorities only, which I think is a racist definition because there is racism towards white people. And that's what the story time is going to be for you guys today. So that's me. This is Ked, right? That's me. One time in high school, some black chick who I didn't know, who went, like, I was coming back from a football game. Some black chick who I had never seen in my life called me a cracker. Now, cracker isn't like a hateful, like, let me get this straight. I don't really give a shit that somebody called me a cracker. I think it's one of the lamest slurs ever just because it doesn't really do anything to me. It's like, oh, you're a cracker. Okay. So what? Right? But I remember it really bothered me because it wasn't that somebody had said the word cracker. I was called a cracker. It was from the fact that this person felt such a need to say a hateful comment to somebody they never knew and to judge me based solely on my race. Now, I could have taken this in two ways, right? I could have approached this in two manners. Approach number one, was to say that this person's a piece of shit. I called this the normal response. Is to say this person's a piece of shit, to judge me based on is to make comments about me based only on my race, and to do so from a place of hate, which is true. This person is, in my opinion, objectively a piece of shit for wanting to say hateful comments to me based only on my skin color. Now, the second approach is the racist approach, right? The racist approach is to say, well, think about what their life is like, right? Well, she was a black woman. And I'm sure that, she had parents and grandparents I'm from the South, so I'm sure that they've had lived experiences where people have judged them based on their race. You know, in media, we see movements that still show that there is massive work that still needs to be done, even though, the Civil Rights Act was what, 60 years ago, 61 years ago at this point. In spite of the fact that legally speaking, racism should be abolished, we still see it perpetuated in our society today. And that might justify somebody, to them thinking, wow, this white guy, he ought to be called a slur. And that's why I let it go at the end of the day. It's like, this is weird, but at the end of the day, it's fine. Like, I'm not going to, hold this over my head for forever. This person didn't know me. I don't need to really, retaliate with my own slurs. I'd make national news, right? But at the end of the day, the racist approach, I think, is the better approach. And actually, we're going to pirate software Max here. I'm going to draw a little curve, right? We're going to draw a little curve here. And this is your level of racism. And this is, how, like, your W score. W score is bad. You want W score to be as low as possible, right? So I think that, believe it or not, I think that people who don't see color, people who say this shit, actually are about it here. And if you have some amount of prejudice, some amount of ideas about the lived experience of somebody based solely on the race, I actually think it goes down. But then as you hyperfixate on it, it shoots through the moon. But I do think that getting to this level here is ideal as far as being someone who isn't bigoted, being someone who isn't hateful, right? So the question is, how do you be racist? Okay, like, how do you actually be a good racist? Again, I don't like the word racist. I'm just using it to be, pedantic and stuff. I think there's an actual term for this, which I think is like culturally sensitive. But I'm going to use the term racist because it is racist at the end of the day. To treat somebody differently on the basis of the race is racist. Okay? So I think that the first step in how to be racist is to do so with good intentions. Okay? You don't ever want to, treat somebody differently out of a place of malice. For instance, you don't want to exclude, I don't know, an Asian from participating in a sports game with you because of your perceived, disliking of Asians. But an example would be if I see an Arabic person who can speak Arabic, I'm going to assume, at first that I'm going to treat them like I would treat like a Muslim, and approach them with some amount of dignity and care until I'm told otherwise, or I'm told not to say those things. Because the way I approach someone who is from the Middle East is a lot different than the way I approach someone who's from Latin America. And the way I approach someone from Latin America is a lot different than I approach a white guy. I think it's all from a place of good because I try and approach people in a manner that is comfortable to them and a manner that is, taking their cultural background into consideration. And in order for me to do that, I have to be racist to an extent, right? Because that is, by definition, racist. But I do so with good intentions. I never, ever not approach somebody because of the basis of race. I never, ever, exclude conversations with other people on the basis of the race. All right? That's step one on how to be racist. All right. Step two on how to be racist is to never overdo it. So no overdoing it. Okay. Again, I mentioned earlier in the video that, and by the way, I'm doing this with a mouse and I have a broken hand. So never overdo racism in the sense that nobody is only who they are because of their skin color, right? Nobody is who they are because they're white, or nobody is who they are because they're Hispanic. It may be part of their identity, but it is not who they are at the end of the day. So an example that comes to my mind is, I season my food. Okay. It's not, I fuck with the tahini, I season my food. Believe it or not. I'm not into things like skiing, snowboarding, or lacrosse. But you would, if you were to overdo it, you would say those things, right? I don't really want to go into other examples, but essentially, everyone is who they are because of who they are. Yes, race does play a factor in someone's identity. That is not what defines them, though. So don't overdo it. And like the example I like to think of is we had this teacher who like went to this kid who was black, and we had a unit on slavery, and she said to this kid, like, look, I understand your people have a history of being, enslaved by our people. By the way, she's white. So if you want to step out of the class, knock yourself out. This wasn't my middle school teacher. This was another teacher who said some bullshit like this. That would never fly, ever. And that's overdoing it. That is overdoing it to the fucking max. Because ideally, that's something where you need to be like, okay, either you need to say it privately to somebody and not in front of the whole fucking class, or you just leave that to yourself and not single this person out. Because by overdoing it, you are being racist, right? By overdoing it, you are approaching the bad racism where you're now fitting people into an idea of who they are based on race. Remember, before we were cookie cuttering everybody into one identity that isn't going to work, and it invalidates people's lived experiences. But now what we're doing is we're making it such that they have to be what we perceive them as. That's not okay. And then the third way to be racist is to subscribe, right? Like, honestly, you guys need to subscribe to Ket Is Here. I accept all types of people on the channel. I think that, racism is not okay at the end of the day. The actual, like, this was obviously a little bit baity, Obviously, I'm not telling you guys in the audience to be racist, but I am saying to be more culturally sensitive and to stop using the phrase, I don't see color, or we are one race, the human race. Because what makes humanity so brilliant, in my opinion, and what makes people so great is the integration of multiple cultures and the celebration of the many victories and the many great things that come from the blend of ideas. And also to celebrate the many different lived experiences people have and to approach people with care and with love. And with that, I have been Ket. Thank you guys so much for watching. And for fuck's sakes, don't call yourself a racist. Don't go out in public and be like, hey mom, hey dad, I'm racist. Right? But you guys get what I'm saying here. Approach others with love, approach others with care. And for fuck's sakes, don't say this shit to people, especially if they are a minority that is being, that is discriminated against or has a history of doing so. Because that totally invalidates their experiences. All right. I hate to get bread tubey and get on my little soapbox. I just felt the need to share this because it was something that I was like, damn, I really need to get out here and let the people know. I'll get to some funnier shit on my next video, but in the meantime, you guys all have a great day. Tell your parents you love them, and let people know that you're grateful for their existence. All right, get out of here. Bye.